All right, now we're learning Parshat Vayechi in the Dvar Malchut. This is a speech which was given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the very beginning of 1992. Parshat Vayechi is the end and the completion of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Torah. Of the first books of the Torah, Sefer Bereshit is called Sefer HaYashar. It's called the straight book. I don't know if we gave charity, but let's give charity. Every class should begin with giving charity. The world exists and is sustained with charity. The Moshiach will come by means of our giving charity. God should return all the prisoners, should bring Moshiach now to make a proper judgment in the world. Okay. The 5 books of the Torah. The book of Bereshit is called the Sefer Yashar. The book of Genesis is called the straight book. The book which is straight, Yashar. What does it mean, straight? Straight, the book of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they are called the straight ones. Straight means the opposite of crooked. It says that whatever Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did is a sign for us. What we're supposed to do. That it gives a teaching, and it empowers the service of all of the Jewish people, and from them the whole entire world. And it begins with, these are the names of the Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel. Israel is Jacob. And this, what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did is drawn into all the other 4 books of the Torah, which come afterwards. To all of the 24 books of the Torah and the prophets and the writings, until the book of Chronicles, Divrei Yomim, Divrei Bnei Yisrael, until the end of all generations. And this is also stressed in the name of the Parsha that we finished the first book of the Torah with. The name of this week's Torah portion, which is the conclusion of the first book of the Torah, is called Vayechi Yaakov. Yaakov, that since that Yaakov was the choice of the fathers, the life of Yaakov was the Sachakol Sefer HaYashar. Therefore, this is the conclusion and the culmination and the sum total of the whole book of Genesis, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And by means of this book is drawn down to all of the Jewish people, all of the blessings and the occurrences, the lessons from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that are in the whole book. In other words, this is the summary of the whole book and of all the lessons which are to be learned from the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis is especially important because it talks about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which that's the foundation of the morality of all mankind, the attitude we should have to God and to the world. The Hamshacha Atzmo is in the way of Yashar. Yashar Yechazu Panemo. It's called straight should your face be seen. Ba'ad Shenase Hamamad of Matzav Shevayechi Yaakov, until every Jew can attain this level of Yaakov is alive until the end of all generations. Vayechi means be alive. That's what the name of this week's Torah portion is. Vayechi, the Yaakov was alive. Tochen Parsha, the content of this week's Torah portion is the blessing of Yaakov to his sons, Jacob to his sons. And before that, in the beginning, it talks about the blessing to the sons of Yosef, Ephraim and Manasseh. It says they will be like Reuven and Shimon will be to me. The 2 sons of Yosef, each one received his own place in Israel. Yosef, there was no tribe of Yosef. There was a tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. after this blessing. All of these, the whole book is talking about the blessings and the spiritual gifts that Yaakov gave to all of his sons, the 12 tribes, that this includes all of the Jewish people from all generations. In the language of the rabbis, Yaakov Avinu lo met. The rabbis say that Jacob did not die. It doesn't say in the Torah that he died. It says in the Torah that they buried him, etc. But he didn't die. Ma zaro b'chaim afu b'chaim. It says that just as Jacob is alive, just as the Jewish people are alive, so Jacob is alive. There are Jews in the world, yes. Just as the Jews are alive physically, they're here, as Jacob is also alive. Not metaphorically or spiritually or Shechai Yaakov, and that the life of Jacob is life that's eternal. By means of this, by means of the fact that he draws into his offspring and the offspring of his offspring to the end of generations. The Jewish people, of course, will never stop. His life is eternal. True life, which is learning, namely learning and doing the Torah. The whole essence of Jacob was the Torah. Like it says, the Torah is our life and the length of our days. In Yanishal Yaakov, that's the whole thing of Jacob. Like it says, Vayakam Eidos V'Yaakov, the Torah Sam Yisrael. He made testimony in Jacob, and Torah he put in Israel. Ubasiyum Kriyas Parshas Vayechi, and the end of Parshas Vayechi, it ends up by saying, the Sefer Rishon, this ends the first book, Genesis of Torah. We say, after we finish every book of the Torah, we say, Chazak, Chazak, Vanit Chazek. Be strong, and we will be strengthened. Kaminag Yisrael, like the Jew. There's 5 books of the Torah, and each time we finish one of the books, as the whole crowd, right, the person, and on Shabbat, the one who's reading from the Torah says the last sentence out very loud. And after he says the sentence out loud, the whole crowd, the whole congregation says, Chazak, Chazak, Banit Chazek. Be strong, and we will be strengthened. That's what it is by Yechi Yaakov, that Yaakov was alive. This is a chizuk. This is strengthening the service of all the Jewish people until the end of all generations. According to what's known, that the sections of the Torah are relevant, especially to the time in which we are reading them. And so we can explain also what's the connection between this week's Torah portion, Vayechi, which is the end of the book of Genesis, Sefer Yasha, which is called this straight book, that this is a giving of a power and strengthening the Jewish people in all the generations to the 10th day of Tevet. What's the 10th day of Tevet? The 10th day of Tevet is a fast day. It's going to be this year. It's going to come out to be this Friday. 10th day of Tevet. 10th day of Tevet is a fast day relevant to the temple. We'll see. Well, especially this year, Sha'asar B'Tevet comes on Yom Shlishi, on Parshas Vayechi. This year it doesn't. This year it comes on Shishi, 6th day. And Shabbat Vayechi, it says, is on the 14th day of Tevet. Okay, not this year. Erev and the beginning of the 15th day of Tevet, which begins on Mincha, etc. Okay, when the moon is full. All right. Let's explain, first of all, what is the 10th day of Tevet. So the Rebbe already explained to us that Parshas Vayechi is the blessing of Jacob to all the Jewish people for all the generations. And that it falls on the week when the 10th day of Tevet is, even though it fell on a different date back then when the Rebbe was speaking as now, but still the message is the same message. And what's the message? The 10th day of Tevet is one of the 4 fasts which we fast from the rabbis. The only fast which fast from the Torah is Yom Kippur. But the 10th day of Tevet is more severe than the other 4 fasts, even more than Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a full day fast. And the 10th day of Tevet is only half day. It's only from the morning. From the morning. The Lokashar Talmud is not like the other fasts, which are from the Sofrim, which they are only in the daytime and not in the nighttime, right? Tisha B'Av is night and day. The night and the daytime, which comes after. The dates in Judaism start from the nighttime. The nighttime is the beginning of the date. The Dugma Psalm, like so, Tisha B'Av is, at first glance, that's the most severe of these four fasts that the rabbis declared. And Tisha B'Av is the most severe. Why? Because it's a full day fast, something like Yom Kippur, which is from the Torah. That even if it fell on Shabbat, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That the 10th day of Tevet is more severe than even Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a full day fast. You think that Tisha B'Av, a full day fast, that if it fell on Shabbat, that you would fast on Shabbat. Fast on Shabbat. The fact is, the only time you ever fast on Shabbat is Yom Kippur. If Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat, you fast on Shabbat. All the holidays of the rabbis, all the fast days from the rabbis, you don't fast. You don't fast. Except the 10th day of Tevet. If the 10th day of Tevet would fall on Shabbat, it ends up that now it's impossible because now we don't sanctify the months by seeing the moon. The calendar is set. But the 10th day of Tevet, even if it fell on Shabbat, in the time when they would sanctify the moon according to the seeing, they sanctify the month according to seeing the moon, they wouldn't push it off to another day because it says on it, Be'etzem hayom hazeh. On the 10th, the fast of the 10th day of Tevet, it says Etzem hayom hazeh. It says on this very day. Where does it say that here? In 31, in Yechezkel, in Ezekiel. It says on that very day, 10th day. So the fact is, the 10th day of Tevet is the most severe of all of the fasts that the rabbis made, in that if it fell on Shabbat, you would have to fast. It happens that it can't fall on Shabbat now, but it used to before when the temple was standing, and shortly afterward they sanctify the moon. They sanctify the month by means of seeing the moon. You would see the moon, they would run to the high court and they would declare. So when it was that way, it could be that the 10th day of Tevet would fall on Shabbat. If it did fall on Shabbat, then they would fast. Why? The four fasts were because bad things that happened in one after the other. On the 10th day of Tevet, it says that was sort of the beginning of the whole business of the temple. First temple being destroyed. It says the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, he laid siege to Jerusalem. And he brought it into being sieged, being matzor. It was surrounded. On the 17th day of Tammuz, the walls were breached. On the 9th day of Tammuz, the destruction was temple. The destruction of the temple occurred. On the 3rd day of Tishrei, it says Gedaliah ben Achikam was killed, first temple. And the hope of the Jewish people was extinguished. Okay, so these four fasts occurred in a progression. A progression. The first of the 10 fasts, it didn't happen in the same year. It happened in the course of more than 1 year. But on the date, the 10th day of Tevet, that's when the whole thing began. That's when Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem. Before that, it was unheard of. Jerusalem is the holy city. It's the place of God. God controls the whole world. He's the king of the universe. Nebuchadnezzar was exactly the opposite. Nebuchadnezzar was not a good bone in his body. He was a murderer, a destroyer. He was a low life. He didn't create anything. He only destroyed things. And he was the opposite of God. God is going to let him come next to the walls of Jerusalem. But nevertheless, that was the beginning. It did happen because it says that the Jews had faults, the Jews had whatever's misgivings. In any case, whatever it was, the king of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, he laid siege to Jerusalem. And that's what began the whole thing. After that, the walls were broken into. After that, the temple was destroyed. After that, this Gedaliah he died. Gedaliah was he was a holy man, and the Babylonians left him in Jerusalem, that he could remain with a group of Jews so that the Judaism would still continue. And he was assassinated. He was assassinated by another Jew. And that sort of destroyed the hopes of the Jewish people. That were, in fact, 70 years later, they came back. Okay. From this, it's understood that right. So therefore, okay, since this was the beginning of all of the destruction that Nebuchadnezzar laid siege on the 10th day of Tevet, this is the beginning. So the beginning as an extra power to everything that came after it. Therefore, it's more severe than all the other fasts, which are continued, which are connected to these days. It's the beginning. From this is understood that also relevant to the good of the fasts, the 10th of Tevet is the beginning and the opening, the inyan hatov shebakol, it's almost the good which is in them. Everything that happens that God does is good, but a lot of things that God does do not seem so good in the beginning, which you don't have to be any genius to see. Says the Rebbe, you do have to be a genius, though, to see that there is good in everything. That's not so easy, and that's what Chassidut comes to do, what we will do. So if the 10th day of Tevet is, in a way, the worst of all of the days of the destruction of the temple, because that's what even instigated the whole thing in the beginning, and the rest was just a result from the 10th day of Tevet. So if that's the worst, so it must be somehow or other it's the best. It must contain the most positive message. Therefore, this is B'yeter Seito B'yeter Oz. Therefore, it is more powerful and stronger than all of the other fasts. Like we said, that if it would fall on Shabbat, that we would fast on that day, including even Tisha B'Av. It says that Tisha B'Av was the date when the Moshiach was born. That's the beginning of the redemption. Somehow or other, the 10th day of Tevet is even better than the birth of the Moshiach. How is that going to be? Like at every beginning is of something that's holy, it has some sort of a bigger power to it than all of the other days. How can this possibly be? We're going to see, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's do the Yom Yom.